Hey, everyone. I mean, how do you follow that, right? Just another Marine standing up behind the podium. Good job, James. I think one of the things that occurred to me during the morning panels before we start off is we're hearing a lot of the same themes come up again and again and again. So we're going to try to spice it up a little bit and really focus in on some best practices. I'm going to do some introductions. I only plan on talking at the beginning and at the end. A lot of people in the room that know me probably don't believe that, but that's what I'm going to try to do. My name is Kevin Schmiegel. I'm a 20-year Marine veteran, retired in 2009. And when I retired, I was really lucky. I transitioned. I had a 4-star mentor who I worked with at NATO and on the peace process in the Middle East called Jim Jones. I was his aide and his principal assistant out in the Middle East when he was under Bush and Condi Rice. And he introduced me to a guy named Tom Donahue. I went into his office in October of 2008. The next day I got a job offer. I transitioned from uniform at the State Department to be his chief of staff at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Not like a lot of stories that we heard back in 2011 when veteran unemployment was at 12%, 2.5% today, right? So it was a great transition for me. And after I got to travel around the world and the country with him, meeting with Fortune 500 CEOs, started a nonprofit called Hiring Our Heroes. And that's how I kind of got back to service and ran 2 other nonprofits for the rest of that decade from 2014 all the way to 2021. And then about a year and a half ago, decided to start my own consulting firm, which is kind of why I'm here today. And it's really based on connecting corporations with nonprofits. And not just employment nonprofits that have reach and audience and brand, and really to break down pillars that exist inside companies. Because in my mind, this is not just about hiring, especially with historic low rates of unemployment. This is about retention, and it's also about taking care of veterans in a way that they not only feel assimilated in the company, but they're given opportunities to serve and find purpose in communities. And by connecting them with nonprofits, getting them out in front of young people who are shying away from service right now, that we actually might solve for a problem on the front end. So that's the why of what I'm doing. All we do is go into companies and we get the recruiting and talent acquisition teams to meet with the social impact teams, to meet with the marketing teams, to break down those silos that exist. And we're bringing companies that aren't in this room. So it's not about a lot of the companies that have been doing this for years, and it's really about bringing new energy and new perspective into this space and new energy. So I'm really honored to be here. We have some great panelists. I'm gonna do some short intros and then kind of frame the discussion. So we're joined today by Latoya Roberts, who's a Navy reservist. She works at JPMorgan Chase, and she's the lead for their DE&I programs and some of the assimilation programs that JPMorgan Chase has in military and veterans affairs. So welcome, Latoya. We also have Kelly, which I love, Kelly Squared. How cool is that?
I'm married to Kelly.
I mean, I could get up. Kevin would be cool too, but Kelly works at Hire Heroes USA. I'm not joking, it's Kelly. Kelly Squared works at Hire Heroes USA, and she's the manager of their military spouse program. So she's gonna talk a little bit from that perspective. Then we have Bruce Townsend from the Employer Support of the Guard and Reserves. Bruce is a 28-year Army veteran and has extensive experience with employers, talking to them about some of the practices they have, and he'll share his perspectives. And then Lisa Stern, who is from Hire Heroes USA. 4 blocks, sorry, I got it mixed up with Kelly. Kelly, not Lisa. Yeah.
I didn't bring the culture.
So you've heard Lisa's name a few times from James, but the one thing that I would point out is when you want to solve any problem, it's kind of cool when you have public, private, nonprofit sector collaboration. That's how we solve for veteran unemployment. We had the White House and joining forces. We had Hiring Our Heroes of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and we had, which is a nonprofit, and we had JPMorgan Chase and the 100K jobs mission, which now is the Veterans Jobs Mission. So it's kind of a cool alignment. So hopefully these 4 panelists are going to help talk about how we can make some of your companies better from a different perspective. We don't want to focus so much on the hiring side. We want to talk about retention and make that a big part of the discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to LaToya. I think her experiences is a great way to to start off the panel, and she can share extensively about what she's doing at JP Morgan Chase, the programs that they're running, and some pretty remarkable retention rates that they're achieving with some of those programs. LaToya.
Thank you. Yeah, so my primary focus within the Office of Military and Veteran Affairs is to create, develop, and execute programs that are geared towards retention, so retaining our veteran talent at the firm, as well as to grow and develop them so they can have meaningful and impactful careers at the firm. And we do this in several ways. We find that mentoring is one of the key ways to get veterans engaged and acclimated into our culture at the firm. So we currently have 2 mentoring programs. One is a one-to-one mentoring program that allows veterans and non-veterans, so we have lots of allies who come through our business resource groups. So we work along with our BRGs extensively. Without them, we would not be able to actually have the reach that we do within the firm. So these mentors are part of the community. They help our veterans get acclimated into the culture. And we find that having that one-to-one relationship provides that safe space for the veteran to go out, interact, ask the questions that they may not necessarily feel that they should ask in an open space or in their teams. And the second program we actually just launched is our group, our circles, mentoring circles. And what we did, we were intentional on trying to reach out to our senior leaders at the firm. So we're looking at our executive directors and our managing directors to provide professional development sessions on a monthly basis to our military veterans and spouses as well in the firm. So those are extremely popular and they have been successful. We have also started, and we work with Lita, actually, who's here, on developing an inclusion training for our managers as well as our non-veteran employees at the firm. And what we are trying to achieve with that is, one, for managers to understand the talent that exists within their veteran population, or the teams that are the people who are on their teams, and the nuances that come with managing a veteran. But more importantly, how can they learn to grow and promote our vets and to have them feel safe and a sense of belonging within the teams that they're attached to. And we also have a training specifically for non-vets to dispel the stereotypes, the myths, and everything that comes with working with a veteran. You know, many times I think everyone in this room have heard, oh, well, most vets have PTSD, which someone actually brought up to me last week. And I can say, hey, we have this training. How about you have that employee who's afraid of working with someone that they just found out is a veteran, to address some of those things. So those are the things that we've been working on at JP Morgan, and we find it to be really impactful in helping veterans feel that they are a part of a community where they belong, and for our managers to also be held accountable to enforce that culture.
Thank you, LaToya. So how many people have heard the phrase civilian-military divide? Raise your hand if you've heard that phrase. I think that's the crux of the issue that we're talking about, right? That was a book that was written a couple of decades ago. There was a book written by a woman named Kathy Roth Duque, who runs Blue Star Families, and that's largely when that term was started. And a lot of people have written a lot about it. That gap of understanding, that gap of knowledge is really what we're talking about on the panel. How do you bridge that gap in the workplace? How do you bring your civilian employees, your non-veteran workforce to a point of understanding? A lot of people are talking about how do you do that for veterans when they're coming into the companies, but how do you do what LaToya is saying? I think some of the best practices she shared, we can also kind of draw some of that out with Kelly and Lisa a little bit, because they are part of 2 organizations that are nonprofits that are largely focused on helping veterans of all ranks, of all experiences, find the perfect fit with companies. So they're starting from a perspective is, okay, what can we do working as this intermediary, sitting in the middle of the companies and the veterans, junior enlisted, all the way through officers, to help them both find the perfect fit, to help them both align in a way where retention is almost assured because they did all the front end work and are very successful after. So I'm gonna start with Kelly, let her tell you a little bit about Hire Heroes USA, maybe touch on the spouse piece, and then turn it over to Dr. Stern.
Perfect. Well, I married a Kelly. That's where I got my ridiculous name from. But yeah, so if you guys haven't heard of Hire Heroes USA, we're a nonprofit. We really focus on 2 pillars. So we have we get the veterans right off, when they're separating, and the military spouses, and we are working with them one-on-one with our career coaches on our team to just provide them guidance. We write their resume for them. A lot of veterans come to us without a resume. We take their military evals. A lot of us on staff, we're not affiliated with the military, which makes it even better because we're looking at those evals thinking, I don't know what the hell this is. And we're translating that into something that civilians will understand. So we're coaching them and we're doing mock interviews, LinkedIn revisions, and coaching them to get them, prepared. So those that come through our program, we have 20,000 veterans through our program right now and 2,000 military spouses who are actively job seeking. So if you guys want to access that talent pool, come to me. I have a lot of veterans and military spouses who are looking for jobs. But yeah, so I think there's just 2 pillars. We also have our corporate partnerships team, and they work with organizations such as yourself to bring your organization in front of our clients, which is our veterans and military spouses. We have different events, virtual workshops, virtual career fairs, and industry spotlights. So we spotlight your company. So we're just trying to get, organizations who want to hire military veterans and spouses in front of our client pool. And one thing I would just question you to ask yourself the question, why do I want to hire military veterans and spouses? And then secondly, once I hire them, why do they want to work here? So I think Kevin touched on retention, and we'll talk about that in ways that you can not just hire veterans and military spouses, but have them happily work for you and stay with you.
All right, that's a great segue to Lisa too, because I think some of the programs, the high touch programs that 4Block has would be great to.
Well, thanks very much. Not that you all had anything to do with having me here, but I'm glad to be here. And it's really nice to see on 4Block, there's so many organizations here that we've had the distinct honor and pleasure to work with, such as USAA, I love Tommy at Verizon. He's one of the most wonderful people in the entire world. We've worked with JP Morgan, Spectrum. There's so many of you here, so I can't thank you enough for just that partnership. So for those that don't know, 4Block is a nonprofit veteran service organization. Our entire goal is to help bridge the divide between military and civilian relationships and begin conversations between veterans and now military spouses. That's a separate program. But between veterans and organizations such as yours. We encourage, we have a 10-week program. 9 of those 10 weeks, we have a different company that comes in to be a sponsor or a host of a specific topic in a class. And it's really an opportunity for veterans and non-veterans alike, and we encourage non-military connected people at the company to be part of these sessions, because the only way that we can dispel myths, training is wonderful. I've worked on trainings for a long time and they do great things, but it's exposure, exposure, exposure. And by meeting veterans and learning what they do and learning more than what their MOS is and what they did in the military, figuring out who they are and where they want to go, and them learning from you to figure out what you do, so the light bulbs go off, and it's crazy to see that. But over the course, I think I babbled, over the course of 10 weeks, we just have 2-hour sessions where veterans, transitioning service members, and the employer community are meeting each other and learning from one another. One of the things that I do want to because something that Latoya said really resonated in terms of what is keeping veterans at their companies. And we have about 3,000 plus alumni who have been part of the 4-block program. Every year, more than 50% of coaches that come back to help us are working in some of your companies and other companies, but they're working in companies in ideally meaningful careers. But what they tell us is that keeps them there, for the most part, besides culture, besides all these different things, is them having the opportunity to come back and give back, whether it's at 4-block or somewhere else. So just when you were saying something that you said, just it made me think about what is keeping people at companies. And it's a lot of what keeps the general population at companies, is making sure that they feel valid or validated and welcomed, and that they're doing something that's of importance to them, but then they also have the opportunity to give back to their communities. I guess I'll leave it there for a minute.
We're going to save a few minutes for questions too. I do want to get to best practices too. So Bruce, you get to back clean up a little bit for these first round of questions. And it's funny because Lisa mentioned exposure. And when we did our prep call, like you do for panels, one of the things that you talked about, Bruce, was the lack of exposure and making the connection earlier on. I think that would be a great point to touch on. And then I'll put you on the spot to come up with the first couple of best practices that you've seen in your interactions with the employers. So go for it. Yeah.
No pressure.
That's what Marines do to soldiers. Just put them.
One of the things that Dr. Neves touched on this morning, she gave a quick statistic, and then Undersecretary Rodriguez kind of touched on a little too. She said the veterans pool in the United States is about 7%, depending on which statistic you look at. The number of veterans in the United States, veteran population, 6 or 7% of the total population. Now you think that's a lot, but that's not what corporate America is looking at. Corporate America wants to hire veterans who are either just getting out of the military or about to, or are within a few years of that. You know, I'm a veteran. I retired 12 years ago, and I can tell you that corporate America is not beating my door down to come hire me. Okay, and that's one of the things. And then Secretary Rodriguez talked about, he was saying there were corporate practices where, oh, well, once we've got our veteran resource group going, it'll self-sustain so we can cut their funding. Both of those tie into that civil military divide, that mindset. So what does corporate America need to do to be able to not only make their veteran employees comfortable working for their company or in their industry, but to reach out to the rest of the company and make those employees feel comfortable working with veterans and encouraging hiring more veterans and veteran spouses. So there's a really lot to that, and we don't have time to unpack it all, but I will tell you that what I have seen in corporate America, the companies that I work with through ESGR, very quickly, ESGR stands for Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve. We are a very small federal agency within the Department of Defense. My office is right down the hall from Dr. Neves when we're in the building. And what we do is we advocate for those employees who you have on your payroll who serve in the reserve component of the military, the National Guard or the Reserve of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and let us not forget the Coast Guard. And we're not out there trying to get people hired. We're out there trying to keep them retained in the job they already have. But I get to work with corporate America a lot. And what I've seen, the best practices in corporate America is where they have a very strong veterans resource group or veteran advocacy group, whatever it is you call it in your company or your industry. I've heard lots of different ones. When those internal groups work very closely with the other internal business resource groups for a mutual understanding and mutual benefit, symbiotic, if you will, when they're all working for the same goal, the people who have never been veterans and who don't understand the military culture or subculture at all, they come to a greater understanding. They see that teamwork. They see it being successful. And they are much more willing to, first off, work with and hire more veterans, and they're much more understanding and even forgiving, if that's the right word, when their coworkers who serve in the Guard or Reserve get called up on short notice and have to go to work for Uncle Sam as opposed to, corporate America. So the one best practice I want to highlight is if you can get your business groups, your resource groups, again, whatever you call them, to work closely with each other, that's probably going to be 75 to 80, maybe even 90% of changing that internal corporate mindset. And I'll also tell you, a lot of the times I've seen a veteran resource group, it's also that same business resource group or advocacy group also is the diversity group, or the group that supports those who have physical handicaps or disabilities. Handicaps are not a good word, but physical disabilities. They're combined into the same business resource group, and for good reason. So I kind of hope that covered everything
great.
for you.
No, I think just a takeaway. So the Veteran Employee Resource Group is the only resource group in a company that represents every other employee resource group. So we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and how veteran programs are at risk sometimes in companies to be subsumed into a broader DE&I strategy, when the case is 43% of veterans are people of color, 93% of military spouses are women, and somewhere between 50 and 60% of them are people of color. There's a significant case to be made, but tangibly, just very simple strategy around your veteran ERGs and building that culture of inclusivity and creating understanding. It's not that hard, right? So you have a Black woman veteran, Gwen Bingham, for example, come speak to your veteran ERG. Why wouldn't you invite the Black ERG, the women's ERG, to come and listen to that? And think about the understanding that's built with one speaker on whatever recognition day you want. It doesn't matter if it's a Veterans Day or it's, recognizing women in business. It doesn't matter. That's how you build understanding. It's a simple action. Think about all the nonprofits that are out there. People use 42,000 as the number. Veteran and military nonprofits. Think about the service opportunities. So if you work with the Mission Continues and you're doing a service project in a community somewhere, why wouldn't you bring more than one ERG? Why would it just be veterans? When you're breaking a sweat, right, and you're putting down mulch at a school, what better way to build understanding about military and veteran culture inside a company than inviting another ERG to join you? Doesn't matter which one. So Latoya is going to get put on the spot too to talk a little bit. There's some pretty staggering numbers in terms of retention rates at JP Morgan Chase based on specific programs. One, to speak a little bit about those programs and maybe a few best practices around the ERGs that you've seen at JP Morgan Chase.
Yeah, I'm on the spot. But yes, so JP Morgan, we actually do have two major programs, entry points for vets to get into the organization. And that is through our Pathways program. We have a Pathways direct hire program, which basically looks at veterans who have left the service within a 5-year period and may have had some sort of experience before. So we actually try to fill an open rec for those individuals. So we work with our veteran recruiters who help with resumes and have those conversations with the hiring managers. And then we have our rotational program, which is really amazing because it gives veterans an opportunity to get into the organization. And there's 2 years for them to sort of figure out what is a fit, right? Many people may come in thinking, hey, I want to be an investment banker, and they'll have an opportunity to spend a year doing good work. It's not an internship, so they're actually working in the role alongside other investment bankers, learning a job, getting licensed. And then they may say, hey, I don't think this is for me. So then they'll actually have another opportunity to explore another line of business within the firm. And, there's JP Morgan, it's not just finance, we have tech, we have software engineering. So there's a fit for everyone. And our retention rate, the numbers for those two programs have been about 97%. And I think the reason for the success is just that we actually hold and provide those individuals with the support that they need within that first year, which is critical for their integration into our culture. And I would say best practices, yes, intersectionality is super important. Part of JP Morgan's DE&I strategy is that we work with across. So we have 7 centers of excellence, as we choose to call it, which is our veteran initiative, women, our Black initiatives, and so on, Asian initiatives. what we do in MVA, which is our Military and Veteran Affairs office, is embrace that whole idea of intersectionality. So we would partner with Women on the Move for events, and we would partner with Advancing Black Pathways on events, just so that we can, if you're not part of the VETS, BRG as we call it, resource groups, you now have an opportunity to meet a vet, hear a story. Part of our training that we had, I remember someone coming up to me and said, hey, I didn't think about a veteran that way. And thank you so much, because now I'm a little bit more mindful of what I say. And what we are trying to do now to be a little bit more intentional is to move away from the photos as well, right? Because I don't think we think about the message we're sending sometimes to the general public who may not have served. So for me, for my programs, I'm trying to move away from photos that have vets in fatigues or in uniforms, not because that's not who we are, but I also want to send that message to the non-vets in the firm that you may look to your left or your right, we're all wearing civilian clothing and you don't know who that veteran is. So when we actually have our trainings, I want to send that message that be mindful, be kind. You just never know who you are in the room with. And it's really important for you to show up and, just be accountable and be careful with the things that you say.
Along those lines, it's so interesting because I did not serve in the military, nor did any of my family serve in the military. I've worked in the military community now for 20 years, actually longer than that, but I'm just doing that. And what's always so amazing is when someone, just like you said, someone will meet a veteran and say, oh, I had no idea that we had so much in common. And just taking those small steps to make sure that you are de-siloing, if that's even a word, some of the ERGs, so that they are meeting across lines, is to help people realize that I have more in common with someone than that we're different. And so within 4Block, we have about 15, again, we encourage the employer community to come to these different sessions week by week in different locations, 15%. And I have to just talk a minute about numbers because I am Director of Program Impact and Assessment, and all I think about is numbers, and I live in Excel spreadsheets, and it's a fun life. But we also, part of it is also measuring what you're doing. The stories are so important and so amazing, but there still has to be some level of measurement. And we measure, we have surveys after every single one of our sessions, not only for our veteran and transitioning service member participants, but our employer participants. 15% overall last year of the employer representatives that came to the 4Block sessions were not military connected in any way. And we asked the very specific question, how, if at all, did 4Block help you to better understand the military community and how military skills and experiences can be an asset to my organization? So of that 15% of non-military connected, 95% strongly agree that it was an amazing, I'm saying amazing opportunity, but they say it strongly agreed that their eyes were open because they had no connection to military service. And I have, I'm not going to read them, but I have quotes from people that will say, I had no idea what the military taught what service members left the military with. I had no idea that there was such a disconnect and a mindset shift that they needed. They just kind of assume, oh, they're a veteran, they're going to find a job. They don't realize some of these disconnects, which is where the divide is, and how they can then help to bridge that divide. And it's really, it all boils down to one person at a time, one program at a time, one veteran at a time, one hire at a time.
So I just want to make sure we save time for questions because I don't want to bust into the next panel too long. I want to save time for the networking break. So if you have a question, come up to the mic because we're going to make Bruce answer it. The one thing that I would say is if you're running veteran programs inside a company, the measurement piece is so important, and you're making a case. You're making a case to get more resources, i.e. funding, so that you can do more. And this is really about measuring success. So it's very easy to survey your veteran ERGs and other ERGs to see where they sit culturally inside a company. And then test things like service projects with different groups and just doing simple activities where people are coming together more regularly. I ran a nonprofit that did 209 service projects with different ERGs during COVID. And we couldn't go see them. And listen, we were making paracord bracelets and writing letters. But I used that as an opportunity during those sessions, it was an hour long, to talk about my service, to talk about my kids, to talk about what it was like to deploy, how many times they had to move, 6 times in 11 years as 3 young boys. And I created understanding and I built bridges. But what was really cool, when the questions came up, there were military spouses and veterans that were sharing their own stories too. And then there were civilian employees asking questions. That's not rocket science. That's just people sharing information and building a culture of inclusivity. So you could literally go out, buy some paracord, get some stationery with your company's name on it, write a thank you note to a troop that's deployed overseas, and have a conversation. So if you do that, you do a survey a week later, or you actually measure higher retention rates, then you go and make the case that these things are working, and you get more budget to do bigger service projects with bigger organizations. Question, young man.
It's funny that you said that Bruce has to answer it, because it's actually for Bruce.
See, I knew that. I just teed it up.
The ESGR used to have, and I'm sure they still do have, awards for companies that are submitted from the employee base. Would you say that having, in that cross-pollination conversation that you all are having the veteran ERG and Guard and Reserve members kind of band together in other companies to submit their companies for the ESGR awards and essentially build that retention strength that they are working at a friendly environment?
Thank you, Bobby. That is a great question. And I am immensely proud to say this, because I know I had a hand in doing it, and George and Nick can back me up on this. Any of your companies that have won an award from Vets Indexes, you'll notice that some of the criteria by which your companies are measured is how many and what types of awards you've received from ESGR. Am I correct? ESGR has a series of awards, and I don't like to call them top and bottom, but we have the entry-level awards, and then we have the highest level. The entry-level award is submitted by somebody in your company who puts his or her supervisor in for what we call a Patriot Award. Used to be called My Boss is a Patriot. We just shortened it to Patriot Award. That service member thinks enough of their first-line supervisor, their boss, to say, hey, you know what, this person is really supportive of my military service when I have to go away, whether it's for a weekend or 2 weeks or a deployment or a military school. That award is nominated by the service member. And there are several in between that ESGR can award either at the state level or the national. The top level award is called the Employer Support Freedom Award. And it was referenced, Dr. Neves mentioned it, and a few other people have talked about it. Every year, we get thousands of nominations from our service members across the country nominating their employer for what we call the Freedom Award. It's the Department of Defense Freedom Award. It is signed by the Secretary of Defense himself. And out of the thousands of nominations we get every year, last year we had almost 2,800. This year we were a little bit low. We're not sure why, but we had 1,863 nominations. Only 15 companies will receive the Freedom Award. I know who those 15 companies are, because it's my project within ESGR to get all the nominations through the whole process. We had 30 finalists. Those have been publicized. You could go on different news sites and see who the 30 finalists are. The 15 winners will be announced mid to late June, we hope, as soon as the Secretary of Defense approves it. But only 15 companies every year win that award. That is the highest level of award that the Department of Defense gives to civilian employers. So yes, if you, within your companies, if you can encourage your veterans and your serving Guard and Reserve members to, first off, talk about it in the resource groups or affinity groups, again, whatever you call it, and encourage their service members to submit the company for that award, that would go a long way to helping out with breaching that civil-military divide, and to make everybody understand how important it is to be supportive of their veterans and their serving Guard and Reserve members. Did that answer it for you?
Can I just add something to that? on the military spouse side, when we see an organization screaming from the rooftops, hey, we want to hire military spouses, we're going to apply. Prior to coming to Hire Heroes USA, I'm a military spouse. I didn't tell anyone I was a military spouse because of the fear that they're going to think I'm going to move all the time. So military spouses aren't screaming from the rooftops that they're military spouses. So if your organization puts that out there, and even with veterans, if you're partnering with nonprofits like Hire Heroes USA or the Military Spouse Employment Partnership, if you're advertising that, then these veterans and military spouses are going to recognize, hey, this is an organization that I want to work for. So just, marketing that and advertising that, that's going to be huge.
No spouse mafia. I like it. Tommy.
And I get kickbacks every time I ask a question, so I got to come up and say something. Now, first, if you don't know what Kevin Schmiegel has done for the military and veteran space, you need to look. I mean, look at Hire Heroes and what it's done and where we were in 2012 and unemployment rate and where we are. And it started with you, man. So, and that's continue to give back to your community. So thank you first for that. And you're from Toms River, New Jersey, so you're freaking awesome. And then I just wanted, we're here to learn, right? And so, I just kind of share how we utilize some of these organizations. The ESGR, we validate our benefits for our Guard and Reserve and run it past how we're making sure that we're utilizing it and taking care of our service members that are utilizing the benefits that we need. And they help us validate it. We submit our awards, but it's a really great pulse check for us, and we do that very often. So that's a good way of using it. We're part of Veterans Job Mission. We get to exchange experiences and share best practices to grow. And again, it's not a competitive space. It's working together. And then 4 Block, we talk about educating civilians. I push veterans to stay away from other veterans. Get experience from civilians. They're going to help them understand the landscape and understand the jobs. And so we work a lot with 4 Block to expose our civilians and our, the people in hiring decisions to come in and learn about the veterans and let the veterans ask them questions. Hey, what should I be doing on a resume? Talk about interviewing. There's so many opportunities out there to utilize these nonprofits and organizations to help you. It catches fire, right? So just doing volunteer work with them, projects with them, I highly recommend just looking into them. And again, veteran-owned business started with him by a Marine Corps, giving back to his community, right? That's what it's all about. So I just wanted to kind of give you some validation because you guys are amazing and you're all doing great work.
You're amazing.
Thank you, Tommy. We'll just take one more question because Nick is staring at the back of my head.
And
one more question, that's it.
And Lisa, to follow up on that, I'm an alumni from 4 Block. So 4 Block helped me with my own transition. And my question, 4 Block. And my question is for LaToya. You talked about the 2 programs at your organization. How often do you accept applications?
It's throughout the year. So I can meet with you offline and I can connect you to the right people.
So we're going to give everyone a round of applause, first of all. So before I give the stage back, raise your hand if you're a veteran again. Okay.
Ooh,
This is my own soapbox I get for 1 minute. I think everyone in this room has a responsibility. I mean, it's good for business too. So your veterans inside your company, to include you, are your best recruiters through referrals. You know it. They're your best public servants. They want to volunteer. They want to give back. And they're your best storytellers. You have to, inside your company, look at these different teams, these disparate teams, and give veterans the opportunity to go out and help you find talent, to volunteer in the community, working with nonprofits to find their purpose and serve, and to tell that story and shout it from the rooftops. And the case is very simple to make. Very simple to make with your company. You're going to lower recruiting and retention costs, which affects the bottom line. And you are going to sell products and services to the 17% of the consumer population who are military and veteran affiliated that account for $2.1 trillion in our economy. So yeah, we're all going to do good by doing that and do well. And the last thing is, by doing all of those things and using your veterans ERG as the weapon system, right? As the tool, even though you have no money, you have no resources, if you do that, we're going to help DOD with recruiting. because veterans are going to be in communities. Their stories are going to be told. Your stories are going to be told, and young people who never had a parent, never had an uncle, never had an aunt who served will follow in your footsteps. We all see in the news, right? All of these stories about Army falling short, the other services changing the bar so that they make mission. That will solve the problem. The answer does not lie in DoD alone. It lies with the corporations who have the resources, the time, the talent, and the treasure to do that. And you all have a responsibility. You can talk to your leaders and you can tell your own stories too. George Washington quote, I used it all the time, at least it's attributed to him. The willingness with which young people are likely to serve in future wars shall be directly proportional to how they perceive previous generations of veterans were treated and appreciated by their nation. That's not about thank you for your service. That's about assimilation, feeling included, feeling valued, feeling understood. Every single person in this room has a responsibility to do that.